Hi, my name is Addie Becker, and I'm here today to present on offender and reoffender decision making. In this report, I'm going to start with an overview of recidivism and the correctional system, and then I'm going to move on to discuss the varieties of offender decision making, and then we're going to examine different criminogenic needs, move on to discussing societal barriers to reentry, and then we're going to end with reimagining reentry plans by discussing what a model reentry plan or program could look like. So, just starting with the current correctional climate. The current correctional climate exists to serve four overarching goals. You have retribution, deterrence, incapacitation, and rehabilitation. Through the different steps of the correctional system, sentencing, supervision, programming, incarceration, and parole, these different goals are instituted. There are numerous types of clients that move through this system. They can often be seen as separated into about 10 different groups. You have situational clients, career criminals, people convicted of sex offenses, people convicted of substance abuse crimes, clients with mental illnesses, clients with developmental disabilities, clients with HIV and AIDS, elderly clients, long-termers, and military veterans. But even within these different groups of clients actually each have their own individual prison experience. People look at their sentences differently, how they want to serve their sentences differently. Some people might see it as they're just here to do their time, while other people might be gleaning different programs and different things the prison offers to try and get themselves in a better position upon reentry. So the variety of different clients and mindsets that different clients have ultimately requires an abundance of different programs and services that should be offered. And the ultimate goal is to rehabilitate clients so that they will not recidivate after serving time and they're going back to reenter society. And there are several trends to flag when we're thinking about recidivism, starting with age. Most people who do recidivate come from the 25 to 39 age group. And the other big group of people who tend to recidivate are people who commit property offenses. They're more likely to recidivate. And just being aware of these trends and taking the efforts to target these groups with additional support and rehabilitation can be really beneficial to long-term recidivism rates. So just taking a step back now, moving on to the second part of this report, thinking about the decisions a client makes to find themselves a part of the correctional system. Understanding a client's decision-making process can better help deter future offenders and potential reoffenders. And decision-making is an extremely complex process, but one centerpiece of decision-making is sanction risk perception. So everyone perceives risks differently. The risk the likelihood of getting caught and how the risk, how severe the penalty is. Is it going to be jail time? Is it prison time? Is it a fine? What will the judge do with their discretion? And these different risks and factors will impact an offender's decision-making process. If they think, I speed all the time, I never get caught, I've never gotten a ticket on this road, they're probably going to think this isn't a risky choice, I'm just going to keep carrying out and doing the same thing. And the same thing goes if someone thinks, oh, I speed all the time, I never get caught, but even if I do get caught, it's just a fine, it's not a big deal, I don't have to go to jail, I'm going to do it anyway, the risk isn't that great for me. But finally, decision making comes down to what the client perceives, and not exactly what's correct. They might think, oh, if I speed, I'll just get a ticket of $50, no big deal. But maybe the ticket actually is $500. But if they perceive a smaller risk, then they won't be able to actually understand the impact of what their consequences have, or what their choices have, the impact of their choices. Therefore, decision making is really receptive to different perceptions. Decision making can also be viewed as two different systems. You have on one side a rational thought process with reasoned decision making, and then on the other side you have a more emotional and reactive decision making side. And both of these sides can affect people differently, and they can lead to very different outcomes. By learning more about decision making and a client's inclinations to make decisions, maybe they're more of a reactive person, officials can better learn what will help them and hinder them during rehabilitation. They can try and gear programming or situations to sort of help them deal with those reactions and cope with them, or they could also try and present situations which let them exercise their rational decision making. Next, we're going to think about the different sanctions that clients face within the criminal justice system. In terms of overarching punishment systems, we can think about prisons, jails, intermediate sanctions, and probation. So prison is more of a long-term stint in for being incarcerated. The pluses are they can offer programming, mental health services, just a lot more resources to a client, but sadly it separates them from their friends, family, community support system for a lot longer. The jail system, on the other hand, clients are there for a lot shorter period of time, so they're not feeling that harsh effect of time, but at the same time, they don't have access to those same services. They don't have the resources that prisons often do. Next, thinking about probation, there's a lot of flexibility here. It can give clients a lot of freedom, but the structure of the system starts to run into a lot of problems. Is this something that should be administered by the state, by the community? It can be really difficult to figure out who should be administering this system. And finally, looking to intermediate sanctions, these seem like a great mix, a way to sort of funnel or adjust a punishment to actually fit the offender, such as maybe someone needs a boot camp instead of actually going to jail or prison. But the downside to this is that sanctions are not always administered with an even hand, and often biases can come in and play a role in deciding who should get an elevated punishment or who should get a lowered punishment. And once someone leaves these systems, they're often going to face several reentry challenges. These can be broadly seen into three different categories. You have the strangeness of reentry, you have unmet personal needs, and you have barriers to success. And one way to really think about and address what someone needs is through a risk-need responsivity model. The implementation of this model supports the idea that the best outcomes are achieved in the criminal justice system when the intensity of criminal justice supervision is matched to the participant's risk for criminal recidivism or likelihood of failure in rehabilitation. And these interventions actually need to fit the specific needs or conditions of the client. So you identify the risk, how at risk is someone to offend or reoffend, and then you look at the needs. Well, what do they need so that they're not making these choices and they're not offending or reoffending? And then what can we do? What can we supply to respond to the needs that they have? How can we sort of help them along the road, really response to their needs at the time and their risk at the time? And when that program's implemented, when it's taken that tailored approach, it becomes a lot easier to help people reenter back into society. So just thinking more intensely about barriers to reentry, these can be grouped into 5 main categories. You have basic needs. These are things such as transportation, clothing and food, and getting identification like a passport or a social security card. You also have housing as a barrier. Some people are extremely lucky and they have family and friends who are willing to open their doors for a client, but other people don't have that. And it can be really difficult for them to find stable housing conditions after being released. Next is employment and education. It can be very difficult for someone to find a job. It can be very difficult for someone to explain why they have a gap in their resume. And they might have fallen behind in terms of education and training, and it can be hard to get the resources to access those programs. Another big barrier is healthcare. Clients often do receive some sort of healthcare and support while incarcerated, but upon reentry, it can be really difficult for them to connect to those resources, just to even find them, much less pay for them or find a way to get to those services. And finally, just support systems. It can be really difficult for someone to feel fully supported again, whether that's just your family and friends, being open to the idea that you are rehabilitated and you are making a change, or just maybe even at work, you're lacking that support system, and it can be a huge barrier to reentering society. So when we are thinking about these needs and barriers, a client's willingness to change also needs to be considered. One process to discover what clients might be more likely to change is through the ICM approach or the integrated case management approach. This tailored approach dedicates time to ask clients if they feel like they're addressing some of their blind spots. The responses can reveal how susceptible to change they are. If they answer things like, I don't have any problems, it's not me, it's likely they're not ready to make a change. But tools like this can help officers decide what clients might be ready to for that support, and an officer can figure out what barriers they'd be willing to attack together. And then finally, just thinking more comprehensively about the future of the criminal justice system by reimagining what reentry could look like. Society could become a less daunting space for people to return. And this can be thought of as 2 different spheres. First, thinking about when someone's actually incarcerated or in prison or serving time. And then the second sphere we'll talk about is someone who is being released into the community. So for a successful reentry plan, the plan must start when someone is actually still incarcerated. It's imperative that someone does not lose their sense of dignity while serving time. The Norway model places a huge emphasis on treating people just humanely, building that trust and respect, and this is something that should be implemented here. This can be done through various different changes, small changes, big changes, and just to flesh out some, first, correctional officers would probably need more training. There's a 2-year program offered in Norway, and it covers more so not just thinking about safety of the officers and them serving as almost security guards, but rather we're thinking of these officers as people trained in psychology and mental health, and they're actually there to help these clients. Officers should also be building relationships, as training can help them start to think about what those relationships can be like. And when officers build those relationships of trust and compassion, clients can come to them and talk to them about their future plans, how they think their time's going to go, what they think about their reentry and their future. And it's really nice to have that community and build that community within the prison. So instead of building this community of distrust and isolation, we're going to be building this community of respectfulness and really just a big community of trust. This can also include things such as letting clients cook their own meals, letting them live in an actual living space and not a cell, letting them hang things on their wall, and just really humanizing the experience. It's going to help them still feel attached to society while they're still having their liberty restricted. And this approach has been proven successful in terms of building a safer society. And maybe more importantly, this approach has been proven a safer model for the correctional officers. But when you're building a work environment where clients trust them and respect them, it means there's less violence and less tension in the facility. Overall, this method will help set clients up for success upon reentry. And moving to that reentry piece, officials need to note that a one-size-fits-all reentry plan is not extremely helpful. It doesn't work for every individual and it doesn't work for every community. And it's imperative to have community support, community organizations set up. It's so helpful for someone reentering society to feel like they have that support. And every person needs a different form of support, and communities are able to offer support in different forms. For example, a bigger city like Chicago, they have more organizations that specialize in things like housing or finding a job because the market is just so big. But in smaller cities like Cleveland, Texas, organizations can offer more wraparound services because there aren't thousands of housing options and job options and this overwhelming sense of information. They're able to offer more wraparound services like helping you find and get your identification back, helping you find housing, helping you find healthcare. So communities really need to sit down and figure out what might work best for them and what might work best for the client. And finally, a good reentry program should be tailored to the actual specific person and last long enough to ensure that a change can be made, which research has shown could take up to a year. So it's not something where you just hand these services off to them and say good luck. It's something that's followed through and it's given a lot of time and dedicated education. So overall, there's just no one size fits all fits all, but with strong community support and people dedicated to going the extra mile to build a safer community in the future, more successful reentries can occur. At the end of the day, there are numerous issues within the criminal justice system that need to be addressed and adjusted. And while these changes will not happen overnight, it's important to remember what can be done. Treating clients with respect and dignity, and thinking about how you could be a resource to someone more than how you could hinder their progress. And just overall remembering that these clients, they're people too. And we want part of our if we want part of our criminal justice system to be about rehabilitation, then we need to practice this and go the extra mile to see that through. Hopefully more of these programs can be implemented and the appropriate changes can be made, but until then, just remember that you have a small part to play before any of the systematic shifts occur. So thank you so much. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and I welcome any questions or comments about it. Thanks.